irrational. Apparently, stores are out of toilet paper already for some ungodly reason. I don't know how people got through like their first batch of toilet paper already. And people are seemingly doing crazy things. One really great example is in Indonesia, very early on. This was a headline that ghosts scare Indonesians indoors and away from COVID. What they did was they told people, and like I guess it was government officials or town leaders, whoever, that that the ghosts that they believe in are out there, and like to stay indoors once COVID hit, and like because the ghosts are gonna get you. Given everything we've talked about with these superstitions, and you guys think of a rational reason why they would try to use this superstition, what this could try to be solving?
That probably helps with like keeping down protection of this. Probably plays on like their natural like, religious aspect that also.
Yeah, so they've got this belief already in ghosts. So now they have whatever leader, maybe it's religious leaders. I don't remember the article now. I just screenshotted the headline. Using this existing belief, trying to convince people not to go out during COVID when there's a threat of getting infected, to try to keep it down. Why might they have to rely on these ghosts, do you think? The same reason we had all the weird things in Europe in the Middle Ages, or why the gypsies do these weird things. Because we don't have an effective government to be able to ensure people are staying in their homes. They don't have maybe the law enforcement capacity. Maybe they don't have trust in civil authorities. Maybe the government itself is, possibly corrupt. They wouldn't be able or wouldn't be willing to enforce this. So even today, we see these weird things going on, which may seem totally irrational, but what they are just responses to lack of government capacity. They're using existing beliefs and superstitions in order to get people to act in a pro-social manner. So by staying indoors at night, by staying in small groups instead of going out, they're preventing infections from spreading, hopefully. So this is actually a good thing, or an attempt to do a good thing. They can't use or rely on regular policy means like we would in the United States. Australia, you're not allowed outside your house in some places because they're trying to kill coronavirus spread. So obviously not every government's going to be able to do that. The US government isn't able to say people have to stay in their homes. So they have to rely on other methods. And this is just one possible way. Before we dig into the study guide, there's one more thing I want to talk about. We talked about game theory a little bit in the oligopoly chapter. Remember, basically, oligopolists, because there's so few firms in the industry, there's usually 3 or 4, they don't make their decisions based off of supply and demand curves, like pretty much every other industry we looked at. What they do is they have to look at what their opponents are doing, what their competitors are doing, and make the decision based on what they're doing. So in the auto industry, there's a couple big players in the US. Let's just assume it's Ford, GM, and Chrysler for now. There's no imports. And smaller producers like Tesla or like the DeLoreans don't matter. If Ford lowers their prices for their regular sedan, GM and Chrysler are going to have to respond. So they're not making their decisions solely on what their costs are. They're looking at what their competitors are doing. So that's why we use game theory to try to figure out what's going on. And you're not going to have to do one of those prisoner dilemma things that I went over in that lecture, for the exam. Just understand that they're trying to make, when they make their production decisions, it's based off of what their competitors are doing. Something you don't see as much in these other industries. They have to rely on producing a marginal benefit equal marginal cost. This one dude I follow on Twitter talks about what he calls the game theoretic death spiral. So I want to talk about this prisoner's dilemma idea in other places besides an oligopoly market. So I try to avoid politics in an economics class, but I'm going to talk a little bit about Democrats and Republicans right now. There's a lot of conflict between the two parties. They'll try to understand, use this game theory to understand why this is the case. So let's say they have two choices to enact both of their policy agendas. They can either choose to cooperate with each other, or they could be in conflict with each other. So they cooperate with each other, and we'll say, this side that I'm drawing these lines are, is the payoff for the GOP, and these clear ones on the right are the payoff for the Democratic Party. So if they cooperate, we're going to assume that there's some overlap between the GOP, their platform, their goals, and the Democrats' goals, and that if they cooperate, even if they don't get everything they want, they're still going to get some of what they want. So they'll get 2/3 of their platform, both of them, if they choose to cooperate and work together, and meet in the middle. If they both choose to oppose each other, they only get 1/3 of their platform implemented, because of conflict, you don't even get half and half. You end up getting less than that. So you end up with basically legislative stalemate, where neither party gets anything passed that they want. I should have thought of an example ahead of time. Immigration reform is a good example. Neither party is willing to give enough. Neither is willing to meet in the middle in immigration reform. So we've been unable to have comprehensive immigration reform. But there's been bills proposed in Congress for 20, 25 years about this stuff. But they've been unable to reach an agreement. So neither is able to get even half of what they want. So if they choose to conflict, both are made worse off than if they choose to cooperate. Now, if one chooses, diggle or draw that line in the sand and say, I'm not crossing, the other chooses to cooperate and negotiate, we'll say the one that draws the line in the sand gets everything they want, and the one that cooperates gets nothing. So we'll see, based on the payoffs, why we see so much conflict in Congress, why we see so much deadlock, and why when people say, well, why doesn't Mitch McConnell just sit down and play ball? Why doesn't he, why don't they agree not to nominate, not to vote on this Supreme Court justice, to follow tradition or follow the protocol normally? Say, hey, there's a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, let's keep this balance with one swing member. So for the GOP, if they choose to cooperate, their payoff is 2/3 of their platform. If the Democrats cooperate, if the Democrats choose to, conflict with them, draw that line in the sand, they get 0. Now, if they choose to conflict, if they draw that line in the sand, if they cooperate, if the Democrats cooperate, they get everything they want. If the Democrats conflict, so they both butt heads, they get a little bit of what they want, only 1/3. So based off of what the Democrats do, if they cooperate, GOP gets a higher payoff if they conflict, if they draw that line in the sand, if they take a hard stance, if they don't back down. Likewise, if the Democrats conflict, the GOP cooperates, they get nothing. If they draw that line in the sand as well, they get 1/3 of what they want. 1/3 is greater than 0, 1 is greater than 2/3. So the GOP is always going to try to draw a line in the sand. They're always going to try to fight the Democrats. They're not going to sit down and cooperate, because they know no matter what the Democrats do, they're going to be better off if they draw that line in the sand. We see the same exact thing for the Democrats. If they choose to cooperate, the GOP cooperates, they get 2/3. If the GOP chooses to conflict and the Democrats cooperate, they get nothing. They conflict, the GOP cooperates, they get 1. If they both conflict, they get 1/3. So comparing it across this time, 1 is greater than 2/3, So the GOP cooperates, they're better off conflicting. If the GOP conflicts with them, they're better off conflicting. So even though both parties will be better off, we could have better governance and they could get more of what they wanted if they both sat down and cooperated together. Each one is made better off within this game when they're looking at what their opponents are doing by conflicting with each other. So what we see is going to happen time and time again when we have these two parties trying to figure out what the other is going to do and then develop their strategy based on that, is that they're going to try to conflict with each other. They're going to draw a line in the sand and they're going to refuse to compromise rather than being willing to cooperate. So this can give us some idea why we see this constantly happening. Why we see one period, at the end of Obama's term, he nominated a Supreme Court justice. In the past, the Democrats have said that, oh no, like you shouldn't nominate a Supreme Court justice at the very end, like right before presidential election. When Obama does it, then they say, oh no, like this is appropriate. Then once Republicans do it, both parties completely switch. Because for them, it's not about, I don't know, underlying principles. They're trying to do what's best for the party. They're trying to get as much, I don't know, of their platform enacted. And the best way to do that is to try to conflict with the other party, draw a line in the sand, and do what's best for the party. So that's kind of a sad way to look at it, to see that it's going to be very rare to see cooperation, very rare to see bipartisan working towards some ideal when their platforms are in opposition to each other, which very oftentimes they are. The idea of prisoner's dilemma comes from two people accused of a crime, like two accomplices. The police bring them into the police station, put them in different rooms, and say, like, if you cooperate with us, we'll cut a bunch of years off your sentence. The other person will go to jail. Even though both would be made better off by not cooperating with authorities, they would both get like much lighter sentences. The cops don't have enough information on them. What they end up doing is they both cooperate with the police. They both end up going to jail for a long time. They're made worse off. So the equilibrium in this case, we call it Nash equilibrium in game theory. In prisoner's dilemma, you end up getting the worst situation because of the way the payoffs are. That's basically what we saw with oligopoly, but it was a slightly different idea. It was just, the example was Apple and Spotify. It should be priced like at $15 and $9. All right. So do you guys have any questions about that? About Indonesian ghosts? All right, let's pull up the study guide. So there's only 10 short answers, but there's still 25 multiple choice questions. Because things have been so weird at the end of the semester, I was out for a little bit, so many people are not in class. It just makes it that much more difficult for us to learn, cut off a couple questions, so the exam's gonna be shorter. Unfortunately, this exam is 8 a.m. on Monday. So you guys are gonna have to be here early. Yeah.
Are you having it online or in person?
It's gonna be in person. I asked about that and they said that you have to have like in person for people that aren't like officially going home, which sucks. Yeah, come talk to me after class.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions like what are the three key assumptions of economics and what do they mean? Opportunity cost, marginal analysis, marginal decision making, the assumption of rationality, and the function of profit and loss in economy. Those are from very early on in the course, but are things that are important and I want you to remember, like take away from this class. So these are going to be touched upon on the final. Pretty much the rest of it is going to be, I'm pretty sure everything, besides maybe like an extra credit question, is going to be focusing on non-market decision-making stuff we did at the end, and then monopolistic competition and oligopoly. So you're not going to have to know stuff from, like a lot of detailed stuff from previous chapters. All right, so with that, what questions do you guys have from the study guide?
Number 6.
So how is an oligopoly similar to monopolistic competition? All right, so with oligopoly, you have some barriers to entry, and you can have either identical goods or you can have differentiated products. So you do get the differentiation that you see in monopolistic competition. You don't have like the free entry in and out that you in oligopoly that you get in monopolistic competition.
Yeah, you say you get free entry in
There is not free entry because there are the barriers to entry for oligopoly. Usually that's like economies of scale. That is just so much cheaper per unit to be a large producer that like small producers can't like enter the market begin competing. So like for like automobiles, for example, like the big factories that like Ford or like GM have much lower per unit cost than like a very small factory. So like Tesla sells much higher priced cars. They're able to get away with it because they have, first of all, they get government subsidies, but also they differentiate themselves enough that they're like super high end cars, that they're like worth the extra money you're spending. But for years, it's been very difficult for a new automaker to come and enter and begin competing. I feel like I'm missing something else. Does anyone think of a similarity between oligopoly and monopolistic competition? Yeah, there's a small number of firms in oligopoly, unlike monopolistic competition where there's a lot of firms. So basically, it's just the product differentiation that we're dealing with.
Just what's similar?
Yeah, so it's similar. And remember, every single industry, besides oligopoly where we use game theory, but the ones perfect competition, monopolistic competition, and monopoly, where we're using the graphs to determine where to produce at, firms produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. It's very important. You will have a question about that. So remember, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's the quantity that you produce at. All right, can someone tell me what's the function of profit and loss in an economy? What purpose do these serve?
Remember, profit and loss shows what's expected up in the market. So if someone uses more things, you don't see a loss. That's for certain reasons. That's expensive. There's only product or there's no market for it. Then they'll show a loss, but there's not a good profit. I guess that leads to more innovation towards that, like one item.
Yeah, it encourages people to innovate because there's the potential for profit. And then it signals to that firm that what you've done is good, keep making it. And to other firms, hey, this is a need that consumers have, a product that fills that need. You should do this too. So you're right, it signals to the firms themselves and to competitors, both profit and loss, and it incentivizes them to take those actions. So the example I gave, which is like a perfect example right now, is the hard seltzers, because every freaking alcohol company is coming out with their own hard seltzer. They saw that White Claw and Truly, or whoever makes them, were earning great profits for that first year when they first blew up. So they all entered that market and began offering their own competing product. Remember, entrepreneurs don't have complete knowledge of what consumers want and what kind of products are going to meet their needs. It's through the market process, through creating these new products, beginning to offer them and seeing if they sell or not, that we find out whether these products are good or not. So it's the market mechanism, this profit and loss, that shows these firms whether their ideas are good or not, whether consumers want them and whether we should keep making them, or whether we should stop making that product and use those resources to make something else that people want more. So these are incredibly important signals. Okay, the one question here. Not really sure. Did I pass it? Yeah, why is there more competition among restaurants than among large discount department stores? Is that restaurants? Not really sure what is that restaurants mean. But why do you guys think there's more competition among restaurants than there is among the large discount department stores?
There's more differentiation in restaurants and department stores.
Yes. So restaurants can, even if they're offering the same type of food, like, so if you look at like Mexican food, you've got all the way from fast food like Taco Bell to like fast casual like Chipotle to like really nice sit down places. So even within just one type of food, you can see a lot of differentiation. So you're meeting consumer needs differently. So there's a lot more firms that can begin entering this market and provide different goods for consumers. Whereas the large discount department stores you have, like the Walmarts or Targets, Kmart if they're still around. There's a few of them, but you're basically offering the same thing. So there's less differentiation. So there's less, makes it more difficult to begin entering that market because you're just providing the same thing. But these other firms have a better brand, they're spread out more, they have more locations. Yeah.
Can you go over why oligopolies are difficult to study using supply and demand curves?
Yeah, so the basic idea for that is just that there's so few companies within an oligopoly that what one decision that a firm makes is going to have a large impact on the others. So if Ford lowers the price of like their sedans, GM and Chrysler are going to have to respond to that. And again, for oligopoly, it's not like there's like 30 or 40 companies instead of like 1,000. It's like there's like literally like 3 or 4 in these markets. Yeah. I know it sucks. I don't want to be that early either. Remember the graph for monopolistic competition is similar to monopoly. So you've got the downward sloping demand curve, like we work with in markets. Because the demand curve is downward sloping, the marginal revenue curve is going to be below that and also downward sloping. And then we have your typical marginal cost curve that goes down and then up, kind of like that Nike swoosh. They're going to produce at the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So where those two curves cross is where you produce. But they're not going to price there. They're going to price where that quantity crosses the demand curve. So rather than selling down here, they're going to sell at this higher price. The reason they sell at that higher price is because they have some sort of market power. Monopolistically competitive firms are able to differentiate their product in some way that gives them some sort of market power. So it's not a true monopoly. There's a ton of phones out there, but if you want, I don't know, the things Apple has to offer, you have to buy from Apple. The characteristics of an iPhone is different than like the Samsung I have, or like the other phones out there. And then whether they're earning a profit or loss is going to be determined by where their average total cost curve is. So if their average total cost curve is right here, and the price is right here, are they earning a profit or a loss?
Profit.
They're earning a profit. If the price, whoa. Price minus the average total cost times the quantity, which is mathematically the way to say that rectangle right there. in the long run, are we going to compete away all the economic profits in a monopolistically competitive market? Like we do in a perfectly competitive market? Anyone have an answer? So because we have this differentiation, in the long run, you can keep an economic profit. Remember, in the past, when we looked at perfect competition, there were no barriers to entry, just like monopolistic competition. So as firms entered, that would push the price down as more began offering a product, push the price down all the way to where you get zero economic profit. But within monopolistic competitive markets, if you have firms begin entering and offering that same product as you, you can then differentiate your product again. You can do something to make it different, meet different consumer needs, and get back your economic profit. Okay, how about some of the public choice stuff? Because that was something I did online, and during those Zoom meetings, I can't see your faces, so I couldn't tell if you guys were like confused as shit, like I could tell in class, or if you were like getting it. So why is it rational for voters to be uninformed or underinformed about the issues?
Isn't it because they're like rationally ignorant, like they don't, it's kind of hard to make informed decisions when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and it's so costly
Yeah.
to actually sit down and read all this stuff and learn everything and keep up with it over time. That is just not worth it for most people. The cost is far greater than the benefit of voting for a slightly better candidate. And because your vote makes so little difference, because of like how many people vote, the odds of you actually impacting the outcome and getting that better person elected is so little that like you get very little benefit yourself. And the benefit of the better person, better candidate, is spread out across all the voters. So it's so small that it's just not worth it for most people. Unless knowing about politics is like something you get enjoyment from. Some people are like that, so for them it is worth it to learn about this stuff. But for most people that don't genuinely enjoy politics and news, then it's not worth it. So they remain what we call rationally ignorant. And why does the sugar quota stay in place? Even though it's expensive for American consumers, and it only helps a very small group of people. Any guesses? All right, so if there's a small group of people that are making a lot of money off of some policy, are they going to be willing to spend a lot of money on it or just a little bit of money? A lot of money. And because it's a small group, is it going to be easy or difficult for all those people to come together? It's going to be easy. It's easier to get, the people in this class together versus getting the entire school together to talk about something. So this small group has a very large per person benefit, and it's easy for them to get together and talk. And the cost is spread out. It's very low for the rest of the US population. And there's a lot of people, so it's very difficult to get them together. So even though a lot of people are being made worse off, they don't have the incentives to get together to change this legislation or change the regulation that costs them money. Whereas a small group does have that benefit. So we tend to see these regulations or laws that are passed that narrowly are focused on one group, helping that one group. So there's concentrated benefits for a small group of people, and there's dispersed costs amongst the larger population. So whether it's tariffs that support the steel industry, not a lot of steel workers compared to the rest of the US. You get the steel industry that's helped out all those workers, and you get the rest of the population that has the cost, bears the cost of more expensive steel. Another idea of dispersed costs and concentrated benefits, not in like a political situation, is if any of you guys live off campus. Does anyone here live off campus? Pretty expensive paying for things like paper towels, toilet paper, that kind of stuff, right? So much easier to just steal it from on campus. Not saying you do, but some people go that route. Even people that live on campus do that too. But what is that? It's a concentrated benefit. You get the entire benefit of like you and your roommates, of like those paper towels you take. Or I know people, some friends that took like the big hot sauce container on the tour and walked out like with that big thing under their arm without getting stopped. Concentrated benefit and a dispersed cost where everyone on campus has to pay what, an extra 10 cents to buy like a new like dispenser for the hot sauce. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. You guys have any other questions about
How do monopolistic competition firms compete on more than just price? It's under on the table.
like if you said how do they compete on more than just price?
Yeah, and then it says give some examples in which they
Okay, so in perfect competition, it's identical goods. They're literally just competing on price. So they have to offer the lowest possible price. So the price equals the marginal cost. For monopolistic competitive firms, they're offering other things with these products. They're differentiating somehow. So sometimes they compete based on quality. Sometimes they compete similar to quality, like luxury. So some, you look at like automobiles. I know it's not perfectly competitive markets or monopolistic competitive markets, but I think it's a good example. You got the German luxury cars. You've got some cars like Subaru that last forever. So you've got high quality, you've got luxury. Some compete on very low prices. Some of them, I don't know, are like lifestyle brands. They use like advertising to tie it to like some aspirational lifestyle. You see a lot of like clothing. Some of them just target different needs. So you have some services like restaurants that target like time. So you have like the fast casual like Chipotle or fast food where you get in and out. Other times you have like sit down restaurants that, you know, cater to your needs and give you like a nicer experience. Gas stations can be thought of perfectly competitive markets because you're selling gasoline. It's all the same. But you have like sheets that are able to differentiate themselves a little bit. They have like clean bathrooms. They have like the made to order food. Now they're selling beer there. So they're able to provide different things than like your regular like I don't know Texaco. For most of you that aren't going to go on to be economists, so I think everyone in this class, things like this, for like how do you differentiate a firm in monopolistic competition, is like one of the few things you'll actually be taking from this class and like using in your career. Like I'm teaching 101 class and it's all like health science majors. I know none of them are going to use any of this stuff ever. Like I'm not like trying to trick myself, but it's a requirement for them. So like I don't know, we show up when we get to it. But as I try to at least focus on some of the stuff that you guys like are gonna need, yeah. And I'm hoping like profit and loss serving as this mechanism to show you what affirm like what's good, what meets consumer needs, and what's bad. I think that's something you can use if you're working for a business. That kind of understanding is at least helpful.
I know my knowledge of gypsy law will eventually.
Well, people tell you, hey, dude, that's crazy. Like, you want to hear crazy? Let me tell you about gypsy law. And you say, it's actually not that crazy. There's solving problems with it.
I'll be similar stuck in random, more random here, and remember not to touch stuff going out of the line.
You have a question?
Which type of market structure is the question is in which types of market structures differentiation applies exists? Is it just monopolistic and oligopoly?
Monopoly competition and oligopoly. Yeah.
And then for, I think it's the one, or it's a refer to table 13.1, marginal revenue one.
Yeah.
How would you figure that out again?
So for the third unit, you look at the total revenue. What's the change from 2 units to 3 units?
Oh, and you just subtract that?
Yeah. So the third unit is $19.50. The second unit is $14.
So it's $5.50?
Yeah, it's $5.50. There's the idea of marginal analysis is looking at like the effect of the next unit.
Mm-hmm.
I never really understood marginal analysis. We just had marginal for like marginal cost, marginal benefit. My first couple classes, and I was on a trip with Timmons and a few other econ students, and we like went to a restaurant, had a few drinks, and the one guy was joking about marginal liver damage. How much do you think this one beer is going to affect me in the long run? And that was the first time I thought like, oh, it doesn't just apply like 1 or 2 things here. It's like always thinking about the next unit of like whatever you're looking at. That's the idea is just like the next one. So what's the benefit of this next unit, or what's the cost of this next unit in production? If you guys have nothing else, you can get out of here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.